The spaceship trembled as it descended through the thick, purple atmosphere of the unknown planet. The alien crew, a group of explorers from a distant star system, held their breath. Their leader, a tall, silver-skinned being with glowing blue eyes, gripped the control panel tightly. "Prepare for landing," they said, their voice calm but laced with tension. The ship hit the ground with a loud thud, sending sparks flying. Smoke filled the air as the crew rushed to assess the damage. "We're stranded," one of them muttered, their voice filled with despair. But their despair turned to shock when they opened the cargo bay. Inside, lying unconscious among the wreckage, was a creature they had only heard about in ancient legends. Its skin was pale, its hair dark, and its body unlike anything they had ever seen. "It's a human," the leader whispered, their voice trembling. "But humans are a myth. They don't exist." The crew stared in silence, their minds racing. If humans were real, everything they thought they knew about the galaxy was wrong. And if this human was here, what did it mean for the future? As they debated what to do, the human's eyes fluttered open. The crew froze, unsure whether to help or run. The human looked around, confused and scared, and then spoke in a language none of them understood. The leader stepped forward, their heart pounding. "Who are you?" they asked, even though they knew the human couldn't understand. The human stared at them, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. And then, without warning, they stood up, their movements quick and precise. The crew stumbled back, unsure of what to do next. The human looked at them, then at the open door of the ship. Without a word, they ran, disappearing into the strange, alien landscape. The leader turned to their crew, their voice filled with urgency. "We have to find them. If humans are real, everything changes." And with that, the hunt began. The alien crew scrambled out of the wrecked spaceship, their eyes scanning the strange, unfamiliar terrain. The planet was unlike anything they had ever seen. The sky was a deep shade of violet, and the ground was covered in glowing, moss-like plants that pulsed with a faint light. In the distance, jagged mountains rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks hidden in swirling clouds. The leader, their silver skin glinting under the alien sun, raised a hand to signal the others. "Spread out," they ordered. "We need to find the human before it's too late." The crew moved cautiously, their weapons drawn but not activated. They didn't know what to expect. Humans were supposed to be a myth, a story told to children to teach them about the dangers of arrogance and war. But now, one was here, alive, and running free. Meanwhile, the humans stumbled through the dense forest, their breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Everything around them was alien, the air smelled different, the ground felt strange under their feet, and the sounds of the forest were unlike anything they had ever heard. They didn't know where they were or how they had gotten here. The last thing they remembered was being on a spaceship, surrounded by strange beings with glowing eyes. The humans stopped for a moment, leaning against a tree to catch their breath. Their mind raced as they tried to make sense of the situation. "Where am I?" they whispered, their voice trembling. "What's happening?" Suddenly, they heard a rustling sound behind them. They turned quickly, their heart pounding, and saw one of the aliens emerging from the shadows. The alien's glowing blue eyes locked onto theirs, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The alien raised a hand, as if trying to show they meant no harm. "Help," they said slowly, their voice strange and unfamiliar. The human didn't understand the words, but they could sense the alien's hesitation. They took a step back, their eyes darting around, looking for an escape route. The alien took a step forward, their movements slow and deliberate. "No, danger," they said, their voice soft. But the human wasn't convinced. They turned and ran, their feet pounding against the soft, glowing ground. The alien called out, but the human didn't stop. They couldn't. They didn't know who these beings were or what they wanted, and they weren't about to take any chances. The alien watched as the human disappeared into the forest, their expression a mix of frustration and curiosity. They turned to the rest of the crew, who had caught up to them. "We need to be careful," they said. "The human is scared, and scared creatures are dangerous." One of the crew members, a smaller alien with green skin and sharp, angular features, frowned. "Why are we even trying to help it? Humans are supposed to be extinct. What if it's a trick? What if it's here to destroy us?" The leader shook their head. "We don't know enough to make assumptions. All we know is that this human is real, and it's here. We need to find it before it gets hurt, or before it hurts us." The crew nodded reluctantly and continued their search. Meanwhile, the human had found a small cave hidden behind a cluster of glowing plants. They ducked inside, their chest heaving as they tried to calm down. The cave was dark and damp, but it felt safe, at least for now. As they sat there, trying to make sense of everything, they noticed something strange. Their arm, which had been cut during the crash, was healing, quickly. The wound was closing up right before their eyes, the skin knitting itself back together as if by magic. The human stared at their arm, their mind racing. "What's happening to me?" they whispered. They didn't have time to think about it. Outside the cave, they heard voices. The aliens were getting closer. The human's heart pounded as they realized they were running out of time. They had to make a choice: stay hidden and hope the aliens didn't find them, or take a risk and try to communicate. The human took a deep breath and stepped out of the cave, their hands raised in a gesture of peace. The aliens froze, their weapons pointed at the human, but they didn't fire. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the leader stepped forward, their glowing eyes filled with curiosity. "Who are you?" they asked slowly. The human didn't understand the words, but they could sense the alien's intent. They pointed to themselves and said, "Human." The aliens exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. The leader nodded slowly, as if trying to process what they were hearing. "Human," they repeated, their voice filled with wonder. And with that, the first step toward understanding was taken. The alien leader lowered their weapon, their glowing blue eyes fixed on the human. The rest of the crew hesitated, their fingers still on the triggers of their weapons, but the leader raised a hand to signal them to stand down. "Human," the leader said again, their voice softer this time. They pointed to themselves. "Zorak." The human tilted their head, trying to understand. They pointed to themselves and repeated, "Human." Then they pointed to the leader and said, "Zorak?" The leader, Zorak, nodded, a faint smile crossing their silver-skinned face. It was a small step, but it was progress. The human took a cautious step forward, their hands still raised. They didn't know if they could trust these beings, but they didn't have much of a choice. They were alone on an alien planet, and these creatures seemed to be their only hope of survival. Zorak gestured for the human to follow them. "Come," they said, their voice gentle but firm. The human hesitated for a moment, then nodded. They followed the aliens back to their wrecked spaceship, their eyes darting around nervously. The crew kept their distance, their expressions a mix of curiosity and fear. When they reached the ship, Zorak led the human to a small room filled with strange, glowing devices. The walls were covered in symbols and images that the human couldn't understand, but they could tell that this was some kind of control room. Zorak activated one of the devices, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a galaxy, vast and beautiful, with stars and planets glowing brightly. The humans stared at it, their eyes wide with wonder. Zorak pointed to a small, blue planet in the hologram. "Earth," they said slowly. The human's heart skipped a beat. They recognized that planet, it was home. But how did these aliens know about Earth? Zorak pressed a button, and the hologram changed. Now it showed a group of beings that looked like humans, but they were dressed in strange, futuristic clothing. They were standing on a spaceship, their faces filled with determination. The humans' breath caught in their throat. Who are they asked, even though they knew Zorak couldn't understand. Zorak pointed to the hologram and said, "Human." Then they pressed another button, and the image changed again. This time, it showed a massive battle, with humans fighting against an enemy that the human couldn't recognize. The enemy was terrifying, tall, dark, and covered in armor that seemed to absorb light. The human's heart raced as they watched the hologram. They didn't know what they were seeing, but they could feel the intensity of the battle. The humans were outnumbered, but they fought bravely, their faces filled with determination. Zorak pointed to the enemy and said, "Vor." Their voice was filled with fear and hatred. The human didn't need to understand the word to know that the Vor were dangerous. They could see it in the way the aliens reacted to the hologram, their faces filled with fear and anger. Zorak pressed another button, and the hologram changed again. This time, it showed the humans disappearing. One by one, their ships vanished, until there was nothing left but empty space. The human's heart sank. "What happened to them?" they whispered, their voice trembling. Zorak looked at the human, their glowing eyes filled with sadness. "Gone," they said simply. The human didn't know what to say. They felt a deep sense of loss, even though they didn't fully understand what they were seeing. Zorak turned off the hologram and gestured for the human to follow them again. They led the human to another room, where the rest of the crew was gathered around a large table. On the table was a map of the planet, with glowing markers indicating different locations. Zorak pointed to one of the markers. "Here," they said. "We find truth." The human didn't understand the words, but they could sense the urgency in Zorak's voice. They nodded, their mind racing with questions. What had happened to the humans? Who were the Vor? And why were they here? The crew began to pack their supplies, their movements quick and efficient. The human watched them, their heart pounding. They didn't know what was going to happen next, but they knew one thing for sure: they were about to find out the truth about their kind. And that truth would change everything. The alien crew moved quickly, gathering supplies and preparing for the journey ahead. The human watched them, their mind racing with questions. They didn't know where they were going or what they would find, but they could feel the tension in the air. Something big was about to happen. Zorak approached the human and handed them a small device. It was a wristband with a glowing screen. The human hesitated, then put it on. The screen lit up, displaying strange symbols that they couldn't understand. Zorak pointed to the wristband and then to the human's head. "Help," they said. The human frowned, not understanding. But as they looked at the wristband, they felt a strange sensation in their mind. It was as if the device was translating the alien language into something they could understand. "Can you hear me?" Zorak's voice echoed in their mind, clear and precise. The human's eyes widened in shock. "Yes," they said aloud, then realized they didn't need to speak. They focused their thoughts and repeated, "Yes, I can hear you." Zorak nodded, a look of relief on their face. "Good. This will make things easier." The human's heart raced. They had so many questions, but before they could ask, Zorak turned to the crew and said, "We need to move. The Vor could be here any moment." The crew nodded, their expressions grim. They picked up their supplies and headed out of the ship, with Zorak and the human following close behind. The landscape outside was eerie and beautiful. The glowing plants pulsed with light, casting strange shadows on the ground. The air was thick with the scent of something metallic, and the sky was a deep, swirling purple. As they walked, the human couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They didn't know what the Vor were, but the way the aliens talked about them made it clear that they were dangerous. "Who are the Vor?" the human asked Zorak through the wristband. Zorak's expression darkened. "They are an ancient enemy. They destroyed many worlds, including yours. We thought they were gone, but now. They trailed off, their voice filled with fear. The human's heart sank. They wanted to ask more, but before they could, a loud noise echoed through the air. It was a deep, rumbling sound that made the ground shake. The crew froze, their eyes scanning the horizon. What was that? One of them asked, their voice trembling. Zorak's glowing eyes narrowed. The Vor. They found us. The human's heart pounded as they looked around, trying to see where the noise was coming from. Suddenly, a massive shadow appeared in the sky, blocking out the light. It was a ship, dark and menacing, with jagged edges that seemed to tear through the air. Run! Zorak shouted, grabbing the human's arm and pulling them forward. The crew sprinted through the forest, their movements quick and desperate. The human struggled to keep up, their legs burning with effort. Behind them, the Vor ship descended, its engines roaring like thunder. The human glanced back and saw figures emerging from the ship, tall, dark, and covered in armor that seemed to absorb light. The Vor. Fear surged through the human's body, but they forced themselves to keep running. They didn't know what would happen if the Vor caught them, but they didn't want to find out. As they ran, Zorak pointed to a large rock formation in the distance. There. We can hide there. The crew changed direction, heading toward the rocks. The humans' lungs burned, but they pushed themselves to keep going. They could hear the Vor behind them, their footsteps heavy and relentless. When they reached the rocks, Zorak led them into a narrow crevice. It was dark and cramped, but it was better than being out in the open. The crew huddled together, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. The human's heart pounded as they listened to the sounds outside. The Vor were close, too close. What do we do now? The human asked Zorak through the wristband. Zorak's glowing eyes met theirs, filled with determination. We fight. The crevice was silent except for the heavy breathing of the alien crew and the distant, ominous sounds of the Vor outside. The human's heart pounded in their chest as they pressed themselves against the cold, jagged rock. The wristband on their arm glowed faintly, a reminder of the fragile connection they now shared with Zorak and the others. Zorak motioned for the crew to stay quiet, their glowing blue eyes scanning the narrow entrance of the crevice. The human could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. They didn't know how long they could stay hidden, but they knew one thing for sure, the Vor were relentless. What's the plan? The human asked through the wristband, their thoughts tinged with fear. Zorak glanced at them, their expression grim. We wait. If they find us, we fight. But we cannot let them capture you. The human's stomach churned. Why me? What do they want with me? Before Zorak could answer, a loud crash echoed outside the crevice. The ground shook, and dust rained down from the rocks above. The Vor were close, too close. One of the crew members, a small, green-skinned alien with sharp features, whispered something in their native language. Zorak nodded and turned to the human. There's another way out. Follow me. The crew moved silently through the crevice, their movements precise and practiced. The human followed, their heart racing with every step. The passage was narrow and winding, but it eventually opened up into a larger cavern. The cavern was dimly lit by glowing crystals embedded in the walls. In the center of the room was a strange, ancient-looking device. It was covered in symbols that the human didn't recognize, but they could feel a strange energy emanating from it. Zorak approached the device and placed a hand on it. The symbols lit up, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a group of humans, just like the ones the human had seen earlier in the hologram on the ship. They were standing in a circle, their hands raised as if in prayer. The human's breath caught in their throat. Who are they? Zorak's voice echoed in their mind. They are your ancestors. Long ago, humans were the most advanced species in the galaxy. They fought against the Vor and nearly defeated them. But the cost was too great. The hologram changed, showing a massive battle. Humans and Vor clashed in a fiery explosion of light and sound. The humans fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. One by one, their ships were destroyed, until only a few remained. The humans' heart ached as they watched the hologram. They could feel the desperation and sorrow of their ancestors, even though they didn't fully understand what they were seeing. Zorak continued. The humans knew they couldn't win, so they made a choice. They went into hiding, scattering across the galaxy to protect themselves and the knowledge they had gained. They became a myth, a legend told to warn others of the dangers of the Vor. The hologram faded, and the room was silent. The humans stared at the device, their mind reeling. They didn't know what to say or how to feel. Everything they thought they knew about themselves had been turned upside down. Why am I here? The human asked, their thoughts filled with confusion. Zorak's glowing eyes met theirs. You are the key. The Vor have returned, and they are searching for you. They believe that by capturing you, they can unlock the secrets of your ancestors and destroy the galaxy once and for all. The human's heart sank. They didn't want to believe it, but they could see the truth in Zorak's eyes. They were no ordinary human, they were something more. Before they could respond, a loud crash echoed through the cavern. The Vor had found them. Zorak grabbed the human's arm and pulled them toward a hidden passage. We need to go. Now. The crew followed, their movements quick and desperate. The human's mind raced as they ran, trying to process everything they had just learned. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure, they couldn't let the Vor win. As they emerged from the passage into the open air, the human looked up at the sky. The Vor ship loomed overhead, its dark silhouette blocking out the light. Zorak turned to the human, their expression filled with determination. We will protect you. But you must be ready. The fate of the galaxy depends on you. The human nodded, their heart pounding with fear and resolve. They didn't know if they were ready, but they knew they had no choice. The battle was about to begin. The Vor ship loomed above them, its dark, jagged edges cutting through the swirling purple sky. The human's heart pounded as they stared up at it, their mind racing with fear and determination. They didn't know what to do, but they knew they couldn't let the Vor capture them. Zorak grabbed the human's arm and pulled them toward a cluster of large, glowing boulders. We need to move, they said through the wristband, their voice urgent. Stay close. The crew followed, their movements quick and silent. The human could hear the Vor behind them, their heavy footsteps echoing through the air. They didn't dare look back. As they ran, the human's mind raced with questions. What do the Vor want with me? Why am I so important? But there was no time to think. They had to focus on surviving. Zorak led them to a hidden cave entrance, partially concealed by glowing vines. They ducked inside, the crew following closely behind. The cave was dark and damp, but it was safer than being out in the open. The human leaned against the wall, trying to catch their breath. Their legs ached, and their chest burned with exertion. They had never felt so scared and helpless in their life. Zorak turned to the crew and began speaking in their native language. The human couldn't understand the words, but they could sense the urgency in Zorak's voice. The crew nodded, their expressions grim. What's the plan? The human asked through the wristband. Zorak's glowing eyes met theirs. We need to get to the ancient human outpost. It's the only place where we can find the technology to stop the Vor. The human's heart skipped a beat. An outpost? Here? Zorak nodded. Your ancestors left it behind when they went into hiding. It's hidden deep within the planet, protected by powerful defenses. If we can reach it, we might have a chance. The human didn't know what to say. They felt a mix of hope and fear. The idea of finding something left behind by their ancestors was thrilling, but the thought of facing the Vor again was terrifying. Before they could respond, a loud crash echoed outside the cave. The Vor were getting closer. Zorak motioned for the crew to move deeper into the cave. "We need to go. Now." The human followed, their heart pounding with every step. The cave was narrow and winding, but it eventually opened up into a larger chamber. The walls were covered in glowing crystals, casting an eerie light over the room. In the center of the chamber was a strange, ancient-looking device. It was similar to the one they had seen earlier, but larger and more intricate. The human could feel a strange energy emanating from it, as if it was alive. Zorak approached the device and placed a hand on it. The symbols lit up, and a holographic map appeared in the air. It showed the planet's surface, with a glowing marker indicating the location of the ancient outpost. The humans stared at the map, their mind racing. "How far is it?" Zorak's voice echoed in their mind. "It's on the other side of the planet. We'll need to travel through the underground tunnels to reach it." The human's heart sank. The journey would be long and dangerous, but they knew they had no choice. As they prepared to leave, one of the crew members, a tall, insect-like alien with shimmering wings, approached the human. They placed a hand on the human's shoulder and said something in their native language. Zorak translated. "They said they will protect you, no matter what." The human felt a lump form in their throat. They didn't know these aliens, but they could sense their determination and courage. For the first time since they had woken up on this strange planet, they felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you," the human said through the wristband, their thoughts filled with gratitude. The crew nodded, their expressions filled with resolve. Zorak turned to the human. "We need to move quickly. The Vor will not stop until they find us." The human took a deep breath and nodded. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew they couldn't give up. The underground tunnels were dark and damp, the air thick with the scent of minerals and decay. The alien crew moved quickly, their glowing wristbands casting faint light on the rough, uneven walls. The human followed close behind, their heart pounding with every step. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew they couldn't stop. Zorak led the way, their silver skin glinting in the dim light. They moved with purpose, their glowing blue eyes scanning the tunnels for any signs of danger. The human could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The Vor were still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they found them. As they walked, the human's mind raced with questions. What's waiting for us at the outpost? Will it really be enough to stop the Vor? But there was no time to think. They had to focus on surviving. After what felt like hours, the tunnels began to widen, and the air grew warmer. The walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols that pulsed with a faint light. The human could feel a strange energy in the air, as if the tunnels themselves were alive. Zorak stopped suddenly and raised a hand to signal the crew to halt. The human froze, their heart pounding. "What's wrong?" Zorak's voice echoed in their mind. "We're close. The outpost is just ahead." The human's breath caught in their throat. They didn't know what to expect, but they could feel the weight of the moment. This was it, the place where their ancestors had hidden their greatest secrets. Zorak motioned for the crew to follow and led them down a narrow passage. The walls were covered in more glowing symbols, and the air grew warmer with every step. The human could feel a strange vibration beneath their feet, as if the ground itself was humming with energy. Finally, they reached a massive door, covered in intricate carvings and glowing symbols. Zorak approached the door and placed a hand on it. The symbols lit up, and the door began to open with a loud, grinding sound. The human's heart raced as they stepped inside. The outpost was massive, filled with strange, ancient-looking technology. The walls were covered in holographic displays, showing maps and diagrams that the human couldn't understand. In the center of the room was a large, circular platform, surrounded by glowing crystals. Zorak turned to the human, their glowing eyes filled with awe. This is it. The last outpost of the humans. The humans stared at the room, their mind reeling. They didn't know what to say or how to feel. Everything about this place felt familiar, yet alien at the same time. Before they could respond, a loud crash echoed through the tunnels. The ground shook, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Zorak's expression darkened. The Vor. They've found us. The human's heart sank. They didn't know how the Vor had tracked them, but they knew they were running out of time. Zorak turned to the crew and began speaking in their native language. The crew nodded, their expressions filled with determination. What's the plan? The human asked through the wristband. Zorak's voice echoed in their mind. We need to activate the outpost's defenses. If we can do that, we might have a chance. The human nodded, their heart pounding with fear and resolve. They didn't know if they could do it, but they knew they had to try. As the crew began working on the ancient technology, the human approached the circular platform. They could feel a strange energy emanating from it, as if it was calling to them. Zorak noticed and motioned for the human to step onto the platform. It's keyed to your DNA. Only you can activate it. The human hesitated for a moment, then stepped onto the platform. The crystals around them lit up, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a massive fleet of Vor ships, descending toward the planet. The human's heart sank. There were too many of them. Zorak's voice echoed in their mind. Focus. You can do this. The human closed their eyes and took a deep breath. They didn't know how, but they could feel the outpost's energy flowing through them. It was as if the ancient technology was alive, waiting for their command. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the outpost's defenses activated. The walls lit up, and a powerful energy shield surrounded the outpost. The Vor ships outside were thrown back, their weapons useless against the shield. The human opened their eyes and stared at the hologram. The Vor were retreating, their ships disappearing into the distance. Zorak approached the human, their glowing eyes filled with awe. You did it. The human didn't know what to say. They felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. They had done it, they had activated the outpost's defenses and driven the Vor away. But as they looked at the hologram, they realized something. The Vor weren't gone for good. They would be back, and next time, they would be ready. The human turned to Zorak, their expression filled with determination. We need to prepare. This isn't over. Zorak nodded, their expression grim. You're right. The Vor will return, and we need to be ready. The human took a deep breath and looked around the outpost. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure, they couldn't let the Vor win. The outpost hummed with energy, its ancient defenses glowing brightly as the Vor fleet retreated into the distance. The humans stood on the circular platform, their chest heaving with exhaustion but their mind sharp with determination. They had activated the outpost's defenses, but they knew this was only a temporary victory. The Vor would return, and when they did, the battle would be even fiercer. Zorak approached the human, their glowing blue eyes filled with a mix of awe and urgency. You've done what no one else could, they said through the wristband. But we must prepare for their next attack. The Vor will not stop until they destroy us, and you. The human nodded, their expression grim. What do we do now? Zorak turned to the crew, who were already working on the outpost's ancient technology. We need to unlock the rest of the outpost's secrets. Your ancestors left behind more than just defenses. There's a weapon here, a weapon powerful enough to defeat the Vor once and for all. The human's heart raced. A weapon? Zorak motioned for the human to follow and led them to a large, holographic console. The symbols on the screen glowed brightly, and the human could feel a strange connection to the technology, as if it was responding to their presence. "Only you can activate it," Zorak said. "Your DNA is the key." The human hesitated for a moment, then placed their hand on the console. The symbols lit up, and the screen displayed a series of images, blueprints, schematics, and maps. The human didn't understand most of it, but they could sense the power behind the technology. "What is this?" they asked through the wristband. Zorak's voice echoed in their mind. "It's a weapon designed by your ancestors. It uses the energy of the planet itself to create a massive pulse that can disable the Vor's ships. But it's dangerous. If we use it, it could destroy the planet as well." The human's heart sank. There has to be another way. Before Zorak could respond, a loud alarm echoed through the outpost. The crew rushed to the holographic displays, their expressions filled with panic. "The Vor are back," one of them said, their voice trembling. "And they've brought reinforcements." The human's heart pounded as they looked at the hologram. The Vor fleet had returned, larger and more menacing than before. Their ships filled the sky, their dark silhouettes blocking out the light. Zorak turned to the human, their expression filled with resolve. "We don't have a choice. We have to use the weapon." The human's mind raced. They didn't want to destroy the planet, but they couldn't let the Vor win. They took a deep breath and nodded. "Do it." Zorak and the crew began working on the console, their movements quick and precise. The human watched as the outpost's energy levels began to rise, the crystals around them glowing brighter and brighter. The ground shook as the Vor ships began their attack. The outpost's energy shield held, but the human could feel the strain. They didn't know how long it would last. "How much longer?" the human asked through the wristband. Zorak's voice echoed in their mind. "Almost there. Just a few more minutes." The human's heart pounded as they watched the hologram. The Vor ships were closing in, their weapons firing relentlessly. The shield was beginning to crack. Suddenly, the console lit up, and a loud, deep hum filled the air. The weapon was ready. Zorak turned to the human, their glowing eyes filled with determination. "It's time." The human took a deep breath and placed their hand on the console. The symbols lit up, and the weapon activated. A massive pulse of energy erupted from the outpost, spreading across the planet and into the sky. The Vor ships were caught in the pulse, their systems shutting down one by one. The fleet began to fall, their dark silhouettes disappearing into the distance. The human watched in awe as the weapon did its work. But as the pulse continued to spread, they realized something was wrong. The ground beneath them was shaking violently, and the crystals around them were beginning to crack. "What's happening?" the human asked through the wristband. Zorak's expression was filled with fear. "The weapon is too powerful. It's destabilizing the planet's core." The human's heart sank. "We have to stop it." Zorak shook their head. "It's too late. The weapon can't be stopped once it's activated." The ground shook again, and the outpost began to collapse. The crew rushed to the human side, their expressions filled with panic. Zorak grabbed the human's arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." The human nodded, their heart pounding with fear. They followed Zorak and the crew as they ran through the outpost, the walls crumbling around them. As they reached the exit, the human glanced back at the circular platform. They could feel a strange connection to it, as if it was calling to them. "Wait," they said through the wristband. "There's something I need to do." Zorak's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "We don't have time." The human didn't respond. They turned and ran back to the platform, their heart pounding with every step. They didn't know why, but they could feel that this was their destiny. As they reached the platform, the crystals around them began to glow brighter and brighter. The human closed their eyes and focused all their energy on the weapon. Stop, they thought, their mind filled with determination. You've done enough. The crystals began to dim, and the pulse of energy slowly faded away. The ground stopped shaking, and the outpost grew still. The human opened their eyes and looked around. The outpost was damaged, but it was still standing. The Vor fleet was gone, and the planet was safe. Zorak and the crew rushed to the human side, their expressions filled with awe. You did it, Zorak said, their voice filled with wonder. The human nodded, their heart filled with relief. They didn't know how they had done it, but they knew one thing for sure, they had saved the galaxy. But as they looked at the damaged outpost, they realized something. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The outpost was silent, its once gleaming walls now cracked and scarred from the battle. The humans stood in the center of the circular platform, their chest heaving with exhaustion but their spirit unbroken. Around them, Zorak and the alien crew watched in awe, their glowing eyes filled with gratitude and respect. The Vor fleet was gone, their ships disabled and scattered across the planet's surface. The weapon's pulse had done its job, but it had come at a cost. The outpost was damaged, and the planet's core had been destabilized. The ground still trembled faintly, a reminder of the fragile balance they had restored. Zorak approached the human, their silver skin glinting in the dim light. You saved us, they said through the wristband, their voice filled with emotion. But the planet is dying. We need to leave, soon. The human nodded, their heart heavy with the weight of what they had done. They had stopped the Vor, but they had also sacrificed the planet in the process. It was a bittersweet victory. What happens now? The human asked through the wristband. Zorak's glowing eyes met theirs. We rebuild. The Vor may be gone, but their threat still lingers. We need to unite the galaxy and prepare for their return. The human looked around the outpost, their mind racing with thoughts of the future. They didn't know what role they would play in this new galaxy, but they knew one thing for sure, they couldn't do it alone. I'll help, the human said, their thoughts filled with determination. But I need to learn more about my ancestors, about who I am. Zorak nodded. The outpost holds many secrets. We'll uncover them together. The crew began gathering what they could from the outpost, salvaging ancient technology and records. The human helped, their hands trembling as they touched the artifacts left behind by their ancestors. Each piece told a story of courage, sacrifice, and hope. As they worked, the human found a small, glowing crystal hidden in a corner of the outpost. When they picked it up, a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a group of humans, their faces filled with determination and pride. One of them stepped forward, their voice echoing through the outpost. If you are seeing this, then you have done what we could not. You have faced the Vor and survived. But know this, the battle is not over. The galaxy needs you. Unite its people, and together, you can build a future free from fear. The human's heart swelled with emotion as they listened to the message. They didn't know who these humans were, but they felt a deep connection to them. They were part of something bigger, a legacy that stretched across the stars. Zorak approached the human, their expression filled with respect. Your ancestors were wise. They knew that the galaxy's strength lies in its unity. The human nodded, their resolve stronger than ever. Then that's what we'll do. We'll unite the galaxy and prepare for whatever comes next. As the crew finished gathering supplies, the ground began to shake again. The planet's core was destabilizing, and they didn't have much time. Zorak motioned for the crew to follow. We need to go. Now. The human took one last look at the outpost, their heart filled with a mix of sadness and hope. This place had been a symbol of their ancestors' strength, but it was time to move forward. They followed Zorak and the crew through the tunnels, their steps quick and purposeful. When they reached the surface, they saw the alien ship waiting for them, its engines humming with energy. As they boarded the ship, the human looked out at the planet one last time. The sky was a deep, swirling purple, and the ground was covered in glowing plants that pulsed with light. It was a beautiful world, but it was no longer safe. Zorak placed a hand on the human's shoulder. "We'll find a new home. And together, we'll build a future worthy of your ancestors' legacy." The human nodded, their heart filled with determination. They didn't know what the future held, but they knew one thing for sure: they were ready to face it. As the ship lifted off and soared into the stars, the human looked out at the vast, endless galaxy. It was filled with countless worlds, each one holding the potential for hope and unity. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning.